This is the morning of the 1st of November 2025. My understanding is that the Supreme Court's going to hear oral arguments beginning on the 5th of November in reference to Trump's authority to execute tariffs. Question I have is why? Why are they going to hear arguments when the Constitution is very clear? Only Congress can impose tariffs on anyone. So why are they going to hear arguments? To me, it makes less than 0 sense. How about to you? This clip's up on Fox, written by Shannon Breen and Bill Mears, M-E-A-R-S. Title: Supreme Court prepares to confront monumental case over Trump executive power and tariff authority. Well, he doesn't have any. Tariff authority is in the hands of Congress, not in the hands of the executive. The justices will hear oral arguments Wednesday, November 5th. For those who say Trump has abused his power. Well, he obviously has, because again, the Constitution is very clear and the justices swore to uphold the Constitution. So why are they wasting their time listening to oral arguments when we know what the conclusion should be? Now, there's a little clip here of Trump with the president of China. President Trump says he's discussed tariffs, fentanyl, AI chips, and soybeans with Jinping. Let's see what's in this clip. Probably an ad there first. There's always an ad. How'd I know? They got to pay Sean Hannity his $5 million.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Kevin Court, live in Washington. President Trump speaking on board Air Force One following his high-stakes meeting with China's leader, Xi Jinping. He called the meeting with Xi, that lasted about 2 hours, quote, amazing. The president says the U.S. will lower tariffs on China to 47%, down from 57%. He also said a lot of other decisions were made on soybean exports, fentanyl, and computer chips. An official traveling with the president also saying that China has agreed to keep exports of rare earth minerals flowing. Again, the president calling his talks with Xi Jinping great. And he said it was a very friendly meeting. Speaking on board Air Force One, the president also made a major announcement that he'll be going to China in April, and that President Xi will then come to the U.S. after that. President Trump, at this hour, on his way back to the U.S., his meeting with Xi lasted for about 2 hours. He said on a scale of 1 to 10, his meeting with Xi was a 12.
Shows you how stupid he is. Economic imperative or executive overreach. That is the question the Supreme Court is preparing this week to confront. Why? The Constitution is clear. All they got to do is look at it. And one of the most monumental appeals over the scope of executive power. A time-sensitive challenge to President Donald Trump's expansive import tariffs over most countries. The justices will hear oral arguments Wednesday over lawsuits from a coalition of small businesses in several Democratic-led states who say Trump has abused his authority by declaring a national emergency to impose levies on nearly every country in the world. At issue is whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act gives the president the power. Well, if Trump has what I think he has on these justices, you know what they're going to do, don't you? Lower federal courts have ruled against the executive branch, but Trump's Justice Department warns denial of tariff authority would expose our nation to trade relations without effective defenses. The financial and political stakes are enormous, with potential immediate effects on the domestic and global economies. Businesses and industries large and small are nervously watching how the court will act. The Supreme Court will decide whether or not Congress, in fact, gave the president the fairly broad authority that he's claimed to impose tariffs on in a way that no president has used it before, said Thomas Dupree, a leading appellate attorney and former top Justice Department official. Not to say that's necessarily impressive, but it is something that the Supreme Court has not seen in recent years and is going to weigh in on whether or not he's overstepped the authority that he has under the law. If he hadn't overstepped the authority under the law, he'd be in Rikers Island where he belongs. The consolidated expedited appeals will be the first major tests on the merits of the White House aggressive second-term agenda to remake large swaths of the federal government and the outsized role of the president has so far played. The administration has been winning most of the emergency appeals at the Supreme Court since January, dealt only with whether challenges policies could go into effect temporarily, while the issues play out in the lower courts, including immigration, federal spending cuts, workforce reduction, and transgenders in the military. In doing so, the 6-3 conservative majority has reversed about 24 preliminary nationwide injunctions imposed by lower federal courts, leading to frustration and confusion among many judges. Now those percolating petitions are starting to reach the Supreme Court for final review and legal analysis. Say the bench may be posed to grant broad unilateral powers to the president. The justice fast-tracked the administration's appeal over sweeping tariffs on nearly every country, which was blocked by lower courts. A higher court ruling on the merits could come quickly, perhaps within weeks. Both sides have urged a quick decision, since the U.S. has engaged in active ongoing trade negotiations with dozens of countries over the past months. This could be the start of several high-profile merits appeals over Trump's executive actions. In December, the justice will decide to overturn a 90-year precedent dealing with the president's ability to fire members of some federal regulatory agencies like the Federal Trade Commission. And in January, the power of the president to remove Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors was tested in another major constitutional showdown. For now, the Biden-appointed Cook will remain on the job. Other appeals that could be added to the High Court argument docket include birthright citizenship and other immigration-related petitions, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in education, institutions, and the environment. The law in question. Congress is given the power under the Constitution, Article 1, to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports, and excises. What more do they need to... Let me repeat this. Congress is given the power under the Constitution, Article 1, to lay and collect taxes, duties, imports, and excises. But when Trump in February began issuing a series of executive orders, he relied on the IEEPA, which gives the president the power under a self-declared national economic emergency. What kind of economic emergency? To investigate, block during the pendency of an investigation, regulate, direct, and compel, nullify, void, prevent, and prohibit any acquisition, holding, withholding, use, transfer, withdrawal, transportation, importation, or exportation of, or dealing in, or exercising any right, power, or privilege with respect or transactions involving any property in which any foreign country or any national thereof has any interest. The Justice Department says the choices are stark. President Trump and his advisors have determined the enormity in validating the IEEPA tariffs would have a catastrophic consequence for our national security, foreign policy, and economy, wrote U.S. Solicitor General John Sauer, who will argue the case before the justice citing Trump's own words. The president has emphasized if the United States were forced to unwind these historic agreements, the economic consequence would be ruinous instead of unprecedented success. Look at this guy's a complete jackass. But the plaintiffs claim no president until now in the law's 5 decades has ever used it to impose sweeping worldwide tariffs. You can finish reading the rest of the argument. Like I said, it's total bullshit. The Constitution is very clear. Congress, and only Congress, can impose tariffs and taxes on anyone, not some bald-headed, short, fat slob. That's just sort of what I think. But like I said, if he's got stuff on all of these justices, and they know he's got stuff, they're all going to roll over. We don't have a Congress. We don't have a Senate. We don't have a CIA. We don't have an FBI. We got that cross-eyed Kash Patel banging his 26-year-old girlfriend, flying her ass around in a $600 million government aircraft. Thing's a joke. You think not? Well, you're free to think whatever you like. I'll attach the link. Let me know what you think. You sure as hell know what I think, don't you?